I will have Kevin come up. We'll welcome him to the stage in just a moment. So, as an engineer myself, I feel like authentication has gotten a lot easier in 10 years. But that's actually false. But it's gotten easier for me because people like Descope handle it all. So they're also making it very easy to handle authentication within your agents and your MCP, all your new tooling. So let's give Kevin a warm welcome.
Peter's being a little. Hello? Yeah. Computer's being a little finicky. All right, perfect. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin. I'm the head of developer relations at Descope. And today I'm going to be showing a demo of our Agentic Identity Hub. This is basically a way that you can protect your AI infrastructure using policies, things like that I'll show you. But first, a little bit about Descope generally as a product. So we are a customer identity and access management platform. So we let you customize and build out how your authentication works from start to finish using this nice kind of drag and drop workflow. It lets you design, your login screens, your authentication methods like OTP, SSO, social login, OAuth, conditional logic like fraud prevention, things like that. And just kind of stitch it all together in this workflow and embed it in your app with a few lines of code with like a React component or something like that. And so today, though, I'm going to be talking about our Agentic Identity Hub, as I mentioned. And this is designed to be a really easy toolkit that you can embed in your applications, either connect it to your AI agents or kind of embed our SDKs in your MCP servers. To make it really easy for you to handle authentication and authorization for AI systems. This is something that's, there's a few companies kind of starting to talk about this more and more, but generally, like when we think about MCP servers and deploying them, like especially like in enterprise environments, authentication and authorization in particular is sometimes kind of an afterthought. Like MCP generally is something that developers will struggle to even implement to begin with. And when they're playing around with it, they don't really pay attention to, what a security team might expect them to. And so what the Agentic Identity Hub is designed to do is to provide kind of a few key use cases. One, to securely expose your product and your APIs through an MCP server, through a nice kind of MCP auth SDK that we offer, which I'll demo as well, basically helps you become a full kind of OAuth 2.1 compliant provider, build out your consent screens, kind of customize and define what your scopes are for your MCP tools, things like that. And then for AI agents, we want to basically provide an easy way to secure all the connections to external services that your AI agents have. So whether that's to things like Google Calendar, GitHub, Asana, things like that, we will actually manage the tokens for those kind of external connections, their tools basically, and provide the ability for you to add guardrails and policies in place to govern how the AI agents and the MCP clients actually connect to those services and give you a way to control that. So that's what the Agentic Identity Hub does. Before I actually go into just showing you right off the bat, like an MCP server with our auth SDK and showing you our product. This is how you actually manage that policy, as I talked about. I think it's an important slide to showcase. And this is what we refer to as the identity control plane. And as you can see here on the left, you have AI. Oh, sorry. You have AI agents and MCP clients connected to Descope, which is protected with what we call our inbound apps. And then there's a policy engine. There's all the kind of auditing, monitoring, reporting that, a CISO administrator or someone like that would expect. And then we have our outbound apps, which is actually managing all the connections to all your tools. And this kind of control plane here is what I'll demo in a second. And that's what allows you to have that control. Okay. So let me show you what the console looks like. So seeing as I think most of you guys are probably engineers, I just wanted to kind of go into the demo as soon as possible and actually show you a real live working MCP server and show you how easy it is to actually integrate all of this in your product. And so the very first step that you need before I even get into the MCP server itself is to configure your inbound apps. So this is basically becoming, this is becoming your OAuth 2.1 provider. This is where you define what your dynamic client registration looks like. So if you guys are familiar with MCP at all, if you built MCP servers before, things like that, you're probably aware of, at least somewhat aware of, heard of dynamic client registration. It's basically how the MCP clients like your Claude, Cursor will actually register and identify themselves with the OAuth provider. And so the great thing about our platform is you can go into the settings here. You just basically toggle enable dynamic client registration. You define what the scopes are that you want to be able to provide. These are and most commonly the tools that your MCP server will have. So if you want to basically provide a specific, if you want to associate a specific scope with, being able to read from a Google Calendar or write and send events to Google Calendar, things like that, you can do all that. And wow, my security team does not like me today. But basically you can define all the approved scopes here. And then another cool thing that we can do is you can actually define what we call an assessment flow. And this is a workflow that's actually kind of similar to the workflows that I showed you earlier when I was introing our product. And these are strictly kind of flows that we build in the back end to harden or secure dynamic client registration more so than you otherwise would be able to. So in this case, I have a simple dynamic client registration, what we call assessment flow. And here what I'm doing is I'm actually just checking basically what clients, so in this case, things like Claude, things like the Cloudflare MCP playground, I'm checking to see who's actually connecting to my MCP server and deciding whether or not I want to let them either be a verified application or maybe just reject them registering at all. And you have a lot of control with this kind of drag and drop workflow. This doesn't require you to code anything. It literally just lets you build out and customize whether or not your MCP clients are from a particular IP range or something like that. Maybe they're from a specific domain. You can control how the client actually registers with itself or whether it registers with you as a provider, and do so with this nice kind of drag and drop workflow here. So that's one piece. And once you've had that all set up, then you can actually configure all of your outbound apps, all of your connections as I showed in that diagram. And so we offer 50, 60 plus kind of out of the box connections and also just generic OAuth connections and API keys as well. So whatever services that you want to connect to, whether those are either listed here or just other MCP servers. If you want to think about it this way, you want to build a Crew AI agent or a LangGraph agent, and you want to be able to control what MCP servers that LangGraph agent connects to. You can define that MCP server. You can define the services that you want to connect to here. And then every time you do that, which I'll show you in a sec, you're able to see all the information about the outbound app. You're able to see what tokens we're managing. And these can be OAuth tokens, which will refresh and kind of manage securely for you, or they can be static API keys, as I mentioned. And the great thing is it's associated with the user that's actually delegating access to the Claude agent or the LangGraph agent, whatever. And then you can actually set access control policies here. So if you look at our access control section here, I actually have two policies that I've set, one for read-only access and one for read-write access. I'm going to demo this in a second. But as you can see, what I've done is I've basically said that for any inbound app, basically any MCP client, effectively, those clients, depending on if they have either the viewer or scheduler role as part of their user, can either write and create calendar events or just read from it. And so as an administrator, if you're like a CISO or something like that, and you want to actually be able to dictate in real time, enforce these policies in real time in your MCP server to say, okay, a user can or cannot do something maybe based on their SSO group mapping or something like that. You can do all that and basically build the policy here. So let me now show you what the code looks like.
It sounded like you were laughing.
What? Don't know what that is, but okay. So right here, this is a very, very generic MCP server. And this is using our MCP auth SDK. So for all you developers out there, if you've built MCP servers before, or you're interested in using MCP servers or building MCP servers, you can try using our SDK. Here, it's to add full-fledged OAuth to your MCP server, it's literally as simple as just basically this section right here. You just provide your Descope project ID and your base URL, a few other little things here that aren't even necessary.
You magnify the screen?
Yes, absolutely. This is where we're actually going to get our outbound app token. So as I mentioned before, Descope will manage all of the tokens for all the tools that you have. So in this case, it's a Google Calendar tool. It needs a Google Calendar OAuth token essentially to be able to go and create a calendar event, things like that. And so it's going to basically use our SDK to just pass in the access token that's granted and issued by us into this function here, return the Google Calendar token. And if it doesn't return the Google Calendar token for maybe because the policy conditions are not met, or because maybe the access token expired, something like that, our SDK automatically manages it for you, returns a 401 or 403 insufficient scopes, and the MCP client basically forces you to reconnect with the proper scopes. So this is something that is still kind of being, the process is being fully kind of defined out in the MCP spec. But for now, this works decently well. And it allows you to basically protect what your MCP clients can do and whether or not they can actually write to a Google Calendar as opposed to just read, things like that. Okay, so let me just show you now what that looks like. Let me go ahead and go to this use MCP. Has anyone used use MCP before? Yeah? Okay. So this is a really basic, this is like a very similar to Cloudflare Playground, except it looks a lot prettier. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and connect to my MCP server that I have spun up. Go and connect there. So this is the MCP server that you were looking at. And you can see here automatically, once I've wrapped the MCP server in our auth, oh my gosh, I am so sorry, guys. They really wants me to update. Once I've wrapped the MCP server in our SDK, you can see the auth automatically comes up. Now this is fully customizable, but this is the consent flow that you can build this out in our product, again, fully without any code. I'm not hosting this myself. This is actually hosted on api.descope.com, as you can see. But obviously, this would be your own custom domain if you had your own Descope project. But what I can do is I can go ahead and sign in with Google. go ahead and sign it with my email. Okay. And then it's going to basically list all of the scopes that the MCP browser client is asking for. You can see one of those allows the agent to actually write to Google Calendar. But if you recall from my policy, it's not so much that I just have the scope that allows me to write to Google Calendar. I actually need to have the correct role. The correct role I'll show you in a second is the scheduler role. And so even when I authorize this, I can go ahead and connect, put in my HubSpot API key, and I can connect to Google Calendar. So me as the user, I'm still saying, go ahead, Claude or Cursor or whatever, have access to my Google Calendar. I'm giving it access right now. If we go back to my users or my users table here, you can see that I only have, or I have the viewer and scheduler role. So now if I just have the viewer role and not the scheduler role, then if we go back to the policy here, you can see that unless the viewer user roles contain scheduler, I don't have access to the read and write access scope in Google Calendar. So what's going to happen is, even though I've granted consent as a user, if I say, create a calendar invite with r@descope.com for 3 p.m. PST tomorrow. If I say that, it should say, no, I cannot. Yes. And as you can see here, it says, I apologize. It seems to be there's an issue with your calendar access permissions, yada, yada. This is directly from the MCP server. This is also fully customizable from the tool response as well. Now, if I change my role, so if I go back to here and I go to my user that I've signed in with, my Kevin at descope.com user, and I add the scheduler role, what should happen is if I use the same prompt, my Anthropic API key is maybe not happy. Let's try this again. Ran out of credits. Oh, here we go. Let me see. I think there's a slight issue here. Let me go ahead and reconnect. Okay. Go ahead and reconnect. Oh, we'll use the uglier playground. All right. All right, so I'll go ahead and connect again, and then connect to my Google Calendar. Okay, perfect. So it discovers the tools, and then I will go ahead and invite for Chris at descope.com for 8 p.m. on August 28th. Something like this. Let's see if it works. Yeah, as you can see, successfully created calendar event. So before it wasn't letting me, but now because of my role, it is actually letting me create the calendar event. So what I basically demonstrated here is A, how you add auth to your MCP server very easily. B, how you associate scopes with tools and how you can actually create some kind of authentication or authorization to return the right tools that the user has access to based on the scopes of their tokens. And then 3, be able to, even outside of what the user would typically give consent to, be able to, as a CISO or administrator, control what the agents or MCP clients actually have access to. And that's a really kind of important point generally for building MCP servers for enterprise grade use cases, where this is kind of a, almost, non-negotiable thing that we need. So yeah, that is my demo. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
So your agent, the MCP server is actually running in like a Descope worker sort of, or where is the?
No, so the MCP server that I'm hosting here is actually hosted in Vercel. We don't provide hosting for the MCP server. We provide like the SDK that lets you wrap your MCP server with our authentication. So this is kind of hosting platform agnostic. It's just a traditional MCP server. We just provide the platform, obviously, where you can, where your users are managed, where your OAuth provider is, configured and everything, where you provide the inbound and outbound apps, all that stuff.
Actual tokens known to Descope or its infrastructure?
The tokens that the MCP client has, or the tokens for the yeah, so we're the authorization server, so we issue the tokens. The MCP client is the one managing, refreshing those tokens and everything with our refresh endpoint, things like that.
Okay. You restrict the audience of that token?
Yes. Yes. So everything that you would expect to do as an OAuth 2.1 provider, define what APIs basically, or what audience claims the issued token should have, be able to basically control what scopes the user can give consent to, whether or not they're mandatory, optional, things like that. Everything is all controlled through our platform.
Okay, you got yourself a customer.
Awesome.
All right, one new customer. Any other questions? All right. Well, I guess my question is, what's the coolest thing an agent has done for you last week?
It's booked me, or attempted to book me flights, but still working out some kinks. It's I'm trying to schedule a trip to Paris, and it's getting there.
Okay, that's funny. All right, let's all hear it for Kevin.